I hope you've been enjoying the conference so far. If the level of conversation and discussion being on is in any measure, then it seems like you're all having a fruitful time. And we're moving on to our next sort of plenary session this afternoon, which I'm quite excited about. It kind of picks up on two themes that have sort of been peppered through many of the discussions today. So one about collaboration. I think I've had a number of conversations where people are sort of noting afresh how collaborative we are as a sector. So that's a really important theme. And the other thing is place. I know Nancy was talking about it this morning about the sort of different challenges in different parts of the UK. And so hopefully this session will bring together both of those themes. Now, we were supposed to have David and Helen presenting. Unfortunately, Helen can't be with us today. So be sympathetic to David, who is doing a two-man show solo. But I'm sure he'll do a great job. But it's my responsibility to introduce David from the University of Birmingham Enterprise, who will introduce a little bit more about the session.
Thank you, Stuart. Yes, afternoon, everybody. Hope you've had a fantastic conference so far. So yes, as Stuart mentioned, there's just one of us in this double act today. Alas, Helen was unwell and very apologetic she couldn't come. She has left me some notes. I did wonder whether I should kind of do a proper double act, and face this way when I'm me and this way when I'm Helen. But I think we'll try and keep it straight, and hopefully you'll work out when I'm talking more towards Helen's points. I also appreciate it's the end of the day, or closing in on the end of the day, so hopefully we'll keep you awake and hopefully keep you a little bit entertained. So this session is about partnership and it's about collaboration. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my own journey, my own experiences, and some of Helen's experiences as well. And try to provide some thoughts towards, in what ways has the collaborative nature of knowledge exchange and technology transfer changed in recent years? Why? What impact has that made? And what are some of our learnings? And we'll have time afterwards, and I'm happy to take questions, but also to hear your own experiences and observations. So this is who you're missing out on. But when I first started doing technology transfer in 2000 at Imperial Innovations, that role to me was totally different from what it is now. Again, this is my opinion, I'm sure others will have other opinions. Of course, there's always been collaboration. You're doing a deal with a licensee, or you're doing a deal with a spin-out, you're investing or you're licensing some intellectual property, and you're ceding control to take ownership of that commercialization agenda. And of course, the technology transfer officer, as they were known back then, could only do their job in collaboration with the academic team. So collaboration is inherent in what we were doing. And I would say I'm a fairly collaborative person, but I wouldn't necessarily have described or thought about describing my role as being collaborative back in those days. And particularly in that role that I started in. It was very much a cradle-to-grave role, or idea to license. Much better than cradle-to-grave, isn't it? I and my colleagues, we owned those invention disclosures. We owned those commercialization projects. We would work with other people, of course we would. And if there was anything about us, we'd ask for help. And we'd help others. And we'd approach our contacts. And the contacts of our contacts, that's how it worked. We'd go to conferences, we'd go to events, and we'd meet new contacts. And we'd find out important information about markets, about competitive landscape, about competitors, about companies and supply chain. And of course, with the help of the old university commercialization seed funds, if anybody can remember those, UCSF, and the identification and reuse of those experienced entrepreneurs that were in our networks. We'd often launch companies, we said with a business plan, but arguably it was little more than a rough idea of what they were going to do and how much investment they might need. But the environment we work in today has changed well, it's changed enormously over that time. And I could probably bore you for days on that. So just, a few ways in which it's changed, and apologies, it's probably obvious to all of you. But academic engagement and commercialisation, that used to be an afterthought, right? At best. Only a small number were interested in engaging. I mean, that's why universities had revenue sharing policies and processes that incentivise academics in the first place, which is to try to get them involved with the TTOs. And then with the reintroduction of the Research Excellence Framework, in particular, that had a much greater emphasis on research impact. And it became much more normal for academics to think about how might they generate impact, maybe through commercialisation. And universities have put so much more infrastructure around supporting that impact. They've tried to encourage greater academic participation, for example, at Birmingham, recognising enterprise-type activities in promotion criteria. And there's also a huge number of external support schemes that have popped up to help academics realise the impact from their research. iCure, those provided by RAN, we've got ones in social sciences, lots of initiatives that have popped up now, which is great. Now investors, they've changed an awful lot as well. When I started, they were far more interested in getting involved at the early day, early on in commercialisation projects. But they've long since moved away from seed funding they might have invested in the 90s or the early 2000s. So we've experienced huge demand, but there's been very little deep-pocketed, long-term, patient capital in the market. And whilst there are SEIS investors and there are EIS investors, and these are really welcomed, of course, they've been quite unfamiliar with universities and had to get to know us. So that increasing demand, that increasing expectation, and that distance from investors, both metaphorically and if you're outside London, Oxford and Cambridge, geographic distance, that's forced us as a sector to collaborate far more. Now my reflections, I first really started to understand this when I moved from Imperial, from London, over to Bath. Bath Ventures started working with the Set Square community, and that was still very new at that point. There were just 4 partners at that time, and 4 partners who also became partners with IP Group. So my reflections today of how the nature of our collaborations have changed, they centre less on that former experience, but more about the experience I've had over the last 15 years at University of Birmingham. Firstly as head of spin-out portfolio, then as head of enterprise acceleration, and then latterly as CEO of University of Birmingham Enterprise. It can't possibly, it doesn't cover every collaboration I can think of, but I'm covering the ones that I've been more involved in and that I feel have kind of shaped me and us. Now there will inevitably be a certain bias in my own reflections. I'll talk about my journey and how collaboration has grown and become so much more important part of the commercialisation fabric of the Midlands. But if Helen were here, I know this because she told me, at this point, she would say that her journey is something the opposite, actually. 10 years ago, when she applied to be the role of Director of Midlands Innovation, she would have described herself as a collaboration professional. And that summarised much of her career at that point, and what was needed to lead a collaborative partnership of then 6 universities. Her first role in the sector was as a project manager for a £7 million project, and that brought 9 stakeholders together. And her role was imposed by the founder to encourage collaboration. It was a steep learning curve, but apparently she ended up making the funder happy, which is great. And she also managed universities' KTPs. I think hopefully you're all familiar with them. Their 50-year anniversary this year. And KTPs teach a lot about how to build a successful collaboration. Structured, clear communication up front about what each partner needs, regular dialogue, clear understanding that all parties should see some benefit. And Helen took those experiences to the Midlands in 2007 when she moved to manage the Midlands Energy Consortium. That was 3 universities with strong energy research interests. And from there, the number of universities she worked with steadily grew. So other than the KTP side of things that she developed at Sheffield, most of the collaboration activity was firmly in the research space. And it's only, she feels, since she worked with me and my peers across the other Midlands Innovation universities that she's got more involved in that commercialisation space. So, let's look back at when I first joined University of Birmingham in 2010. So I was a university employee working with the technology transfer company, then known as Outer Innovations. It's the same company as today, just a different name. And that was part of the wider research and innovation services. Now, as you can see, I've described this era as siloed but supportive. Again, these are all personal views, and I should caveat, I absolutely love University of Birmingham, but I'm being honest, that's how I felt. And the people were all really lovely, okay, but if I'm honest, and I did find it an odd environment to work in. You know, unlike Bath, which had an innovation centre that was a couple of miles away from the university and its technology transfer office, ours was actually on the Birmingham Research Park, which we run. So we were located in the same place. How brilliant is that? And yet, as far as I could see, those in the company or in the wider team, save those who kind of had to manage the maintenance of the park, they had very little to do with the companies that were based there. Most of my meetings with academics were on campus. They weren't at the research park at all. I also found, to be honest, the other technology transfer staff, which were only small in numbers, and they too kind of kept themselves apart from others. I was responsible for spin-outs, yet I didn't sit with them at all. I sat in a completely different part of the office. Yet Birmingham was clearly an experienced collaborator. It was just finishing off the Science City project, across the Midlands, funded by the then Regional Development Agency, Advantage West Midlands, which was just closing down. So it had collaborated with other universities, lots of other universities, and lots of other organisations. It had collaborated on different funds. There was the Spinner Fund, the Advantage Growth Fund, managed by Midven, and of course it was one of the founding partners of Mercia as well. But rightly or wrongly, I think the impression that some others outside the university had was that the university could be quite parochial in its approach to collaboration. And given my then very recent experiences with Sex Wed, it's kind of the impression I had as well. On the other hand, I was given the authority and the space to connect with everybody I could within the region, which was brilliant. And it's such a lovely, such a friendly region. It was brilliant. And university leadership, they were clearly supportive of what we were trying to do with our commercialisation activities. They were clearly up for empowering us to make our own decisions and to take a few risks, do some experiments as well. So in 2011, we started an experiment with a joint venture, which we call Bioscience Ventures. And that was in collaboration with a company called Abingdon Health. And that was quite a big and in some ways risky thing to do. It essentially could be seen as looking like we were outsourcing the commercialisation of our diagnostics portfolio to a third party. It wasn't exactly that, but we were definitely collaborating together on that diagnostics portfolio. And it never worked like that. But even so, it was quite a bold move. And through that vehicle, we built Seroscience, which commercialised a test to diagnose patients with multiple myeloma, and which was ultimately acquired by Abingdon Health. And we developed 2 further spin-outs, Alta Biosciences and Linear Diagnostics. So that joint venture lasted around 5 years. Did it become the self-sustaining commercialisation partner that we had in mind when we started it? No, it didn't. But there wasn't ever any dispute. There was no issue with that. it was just clear it had achieved what it could with the resources that it had. And frankly, Abingdon Health, which we were at that point then a shareholder in, having acquired Sirius, they had other ambitions, really great ambitions, which we were also very supportive of. And it's since listed and employs around 85 people. It's turning over about £6 million a year. That's brilliant. Okay, something fantastic that's happened as a result of this collaboration, as well as the other companies that we formed. And as I say, the university was really supportive, not just with deals like this, but it enabled us, it wanted us to start to invest more, not just in commercial proof of concept, but also managing occasional co-investments into spin-outs in order to attract and close significant additional funds, which was great. So, it really was empowering us and empowering us to take some risks. And we started to develop ideas for incubation programs and spaces. So in 2012, an interesting opportunity came along, and that was to bid for some European Regional Development Funding, or ERDF. Anybody else get involved in ERDF projects? Yeah, great, okay, you're aware of all the tick boxes you had to do in your over many hours of assists. So that's the opportunity that we had as well. And that was to build a fantastic new biohub building, a place where both our own emerging life science companies, our life science spin-outs, could start life, as well as others in the region. And something that was really missing from our ecosystem, especially given about half of our spin-out portfolio is life science-based, but they weren't there because they had to go elsewhere. We didn't have anything to support them. Now, in one sense, the bid was only somewhat collaborative. It was only set out to be somewhat collaborative. It involved Birmingham City Council. At that time, they owned half of Birmingham Research Park, so they weren't necessarily involved. But this project, it absolutely demonstrated the university working collaboratively with both the local enterprise partnership and Birmingham City Council in developing a common agenda for the life sciences sector, and that we all had a clear stake in supporting business growth. And that became really important to us later. We hadn't really appreciated this, but how important it would be in the case for development of a new Birmingham Health Innovation Campus, which is just opening at the moment, as well as further support we got through things like the West Midlands Health Tech Innovation Accelerator. So it became really, really important. But the reason I mention this project in particular is because it was a key turning point for us in terms of making the organisation that much more collaborative. The output of this project was going to be this fantastic life science incubator that I mentioned that would support the growth of life science companies. And in return for that, and in return for the funding, we had to support the growth of a number of companies. Yet the building wouldn't be ready till the end. How are we going to do that? To deliver it, created a new enterprise acceleration team. And as well as supporting spin-out development and spin-out portfolio management and looking after the entrepreneurial development of our academics, which included the running of the Medici program, which I know a number of you will be aware of. It also looked after the incubation services to be provided through this ERDF program. And we created the BizIn, a space for that incubation, which included co-working space, meeting rooms, and an event space as well. And for the first time since I joined the university, the research part was starting to bubble with activity. New and experienced entrepreneurs were coming in all the time as were service providers, investors, and others that were keen to help. We were having events all the time. My colleagues started a business club, which they're still running to this day. So we hosted that, and that brought in other stakeholders to mingle with our members. And I think this also legitimised within the university the need for and the benefit of collaborating with other regional stakeholders. There was no way we could deliver this project effectively on our own. We had to be plugged into those other stakeholders to generate interest in our programme, to hit our targets, frankly, but also to ensure that we helped add value to our beneficiaries so that they were effectively signposted to other support. And one of the most important stakeholders that we ended up working with was arguably Birmingham Research Park's biggest competitor, Innovation Birmingham. And that was the other science park owned by the council and located in the city. And that cooperation, which was very much eased by the fact that we had entrepreneurs and residents who were also working closely with Innovation Birmingham, that proved to be incredibly synergistic. Yes, we were competition of sorts. There was overlap in the tenants attracted, but by and large, you could kind of segment the customers in two ways. If you were an ambitious digital company at that time, you're probably going to work with a cluster of other digital entrepreneurs who were based at Innovation Birmingham. If you were otherwise a deep tech company, or you wanted to use or be closer to research and facilities and experts for a research-intensive university, you probably more likely wanted to join our Birmingham Research Park. But frankly, it didn't really matter. We would all help each other anyway. And I don't remember ever fighting over tenants or moaning about who's located where. I just don't remember it happening. And when that ERDF programme completed, the evaluation report, it praised the project in a number of ways, not just for the 900 hours of business support, the more than 100 entrepreneurs that engaged, or over 20 businesses that survived, more than 40 jobs created, or 3 million of investment raised. You're familiar with this because you would have had similar figures probably with your own ERDF projects. But we also praise for our effective engagement on an ongoing basis with stakeholders not directly involved in the project, such as the local enterprise partnership and elected members. There was a recognition that a key benefit was that we increasingly worked much more collaboratively with other universities in the region and with Innovation Birmingham. And there was much greater coordination to prevent duplication of events targeting the same audience. And that project and our collaborations were so strong that we put in another bid for ERDF funding to continue business support, but this time very much in collaboration with Innovation Birmingham. So, a huge amount happened in 2015 and over the following couple of years as that project took place. The BioHub finally opened, and very quickly our shared laboratory space filled up, and demand was so great that we invested in further dedicated units on the floor above so that some of the businesses could grow into them, and actually they were almost immediately filled. And the research park was now thriving so much that we finally had to open up a cafe on site, which is an interesting indicator of a thriving research park. And given our presence and our visibility, we started to get invited to the table to discuss more cross-regional initiatives. We, like others in the region, we agreed to work with the likes of Pam Waddell and her Innovation Alliance on a new VentureFest West Midlands, which once a year still brings in businesses, entrepreneurs, academics, professional support companies, investors, all together under one roof. And furthermore, we then renamed University of Birmingham Enterprise. We co-created what was known as Pitch Up, and that was with both Aston University Centre for Growth and University of Warwick's Minerva Business Centre network. This was and has continued to be a platform for helping startups and young companies to become investment ready, to get in front of investors. And over the last 10 years, another anniversary, this competition has put over 200 entrepreneurs directly in front of investors and helped bring in over £65 million of investments to the region's small businesses. So, before I continue my journey and my reflections, I think it's probably helpful to pause and look at the evolution of Midlands innovation, which started around about this time, which Helen would have covered if she were here. So you've heard me reflect on the growing levels of collaboration I witnessed in relation to commercialisation. But I know that Helen feels that strategic collaboration between the universities in the Midlands was actually much more advanced on the research side of things. She came to the region to manage a strategic collaboration, Midlands Energy Consortium, which brought together the universities of Birmingham, Loughborough and Nottingham, who together secured something called the Energy Technology Institute for the region. And they presented their collective energy research capabilities in order to win that hosting and were supported by the two regional development agencies. They committed to ongoing collaboration, and that's where Helen's role came in. And it was successful. They secured funding for collaborative energy centres, for doctoral training, for collaborative research networks, and they established a collaborative energy graduate school delivering joint master's level training. And in parallel, the universities had established some other strategic collaborations. The Midlands Physics Alliance. They founded the Manufacturing Technology Centre. 5 universities established the M5, not the motorway, collaboration. And that was a little after the N8 was established in the north. Now, M5 is essentially the predecessor of Midlands Innovation. It was a response to something called the Wakeham Review on research efficiency. And it was focused on equipment sharing, and it precipitated the establishment of a number of regional research infrastructure related networks, as well as the country's first equipment sharing database. So in 2015, George Osborne was announcing capital research investments in places: Crick in the southeast, Royce in the north. The Vice-Chancellors came together and they rebranded M5 to Midlands Innovation, gave it a proper budget, and pitched essentially the Midlands Energy Consortium as the Midlands offer for capital investment. Now, Helen joined Midlands Innovation, having supported the successful bid for £60 million of capital investment in that energy research and demonstration infrastructure. Midlands Innovation at that time had a firm focus on research, had strong support at the highest levels of then 6 universities and the Vice-Chancellors, which still meet 3 or 4 times a year to discuss the collaboration. That's the theme I'll return to. And in 2017, Midlands Innovation became a partnership of 8, and those high levels of support continued. The creation of Midlands Innovation back in 2015 just slightly preceded the rise of the devolution agenda. The Northern Powerhouse and Midlands Engine were christened by government that year, and we started to see an increasing focus on addressing imbalance in investment and the creation of devolved structures from them. Midlands Innovation provided a forum for different groups to come together, share best practice, staff associated with research efficiency, research directors, graduate school deans, and later on commercialisation leads. And as I said, in 2017 it became partnership of 8. It's quite tricky trying to ensure value to all in a group of universities collaborating, when in many research areas there might only be 1 or 2 who don't really have capabilities in that topic or discipline. But Midlands Innovation had some guiding principles that recognise that. Not everybody needs to be involved. It doesn't always have to involve all 8 partners. But I also know that Helen would say there needs to be some activity where all 8 are working together and benefiting. And one area where I know Helen feels the consortium really got that right, and which really put it on the map, was its work on technicians. That initiative showed that it could deliver initiatives on behalf of the collective with a benefit to all, and that we could pilot something in the Midlands and impact at a national scale. And that's seen in many ways as a turning point for the collaboration. So let's go back now to how that coincides with my own journey. So as we move beyond 2018, that's when we started to see the impact of Brexit, said it, the era of ERDF and ESIF, European Structural Innovation Funds. That support was over, bar little bits of funding here and there to sustain a few projects. But it's also the time when we started to work much more collaboratively with some of our other Midlands regional universities. So you've heard other parts of the university become part of Midlands Innovation. So we, the Midlands Innovation Technology Transfer Offices, we decided that we would use it as an opportunity to work together ourselves, areas where we felt there were shared gaps that we could address, We saw that as an opportunity to bid for some connected capability funding to do just that. Thus was born MICRA, the Midlands Innovation Commercialisation Research Accelerator. I'm not sure about that acronym, but there you go. But it was a really fantastic project, and it enabled us to put on shared innovation and enterprise training for both our academics and our staff. It brought in additional business development resource. We could strengthen our pipelines, accelerate deals, which significantly eased inter-office interactions to support each other. It provided a new web gateway to help us collate and promote our collective achievements and helped introduce express licensing to us. And we had funds we could deploy to support not just commercial proof of concept, but also the incubation of companies within our science parks and incubators. And that collaboration supported 49 projects, led to 26 new prototypes, 33 industry collaborations, increased leverage funding from, well, over 100 million of increased leverage funding. And we had some fantastic spin-outs developed as a consequence, such as Aston Vision Sciences, an Aston spin-out which creates technically advanced, high-value solutions for optometrists, ophthalmologists, and eye care providers. Now, that company received a commercial grant award which supported an internship, specialist advice, market testing activities, and that led to around £1 million investment and further grant support. 4D Medicine, which was a spin-out between University of Warwick and Birmingham, spun out following that MICRA support. That's now developing 3D printed biomaterials for use in medicine. And that's since raised over £7.5 million. And we've got the likes of Monicus, a liquid biopsy company, who are supported within the BioHub. And that's since grown significantly, and they've now moved to their own purpose-built offices in Birmingham. And they deliver non-invasive cancer tests around the world. And its flagship product, Gallius Bladder, is a highly-sensitive urine test for bladder cancer, again developed in partnership with the University of Birmingham researchers. So the MICRA collaboration really delivered impact, even despite the obvious bump in the road in 2020. But I think, to be honest, there's one aspect of the project which ensured the survival of the Midlands Innovation TTO grouping beyond the cessation of MICRA's funding in 2021. I'll throw in some stats. So we in the Midlands generate around 3.7 billion of income. We're home to 7% of the UK's academic workforce, 10% of the UK's postgrads. 3 of our partners rank in the UK's top 20 for research power. We're home to clusters of excellent science, ranking top 3 in 10 areas. Between us, around 120 active spin-out companies. We're one of the top regions for filing invention disclosures, filing patent applications. But despite all of that, there has and continues to be a significant funding gap in the Midlands. We're home to 11% of the UK's high-growth SMEs, yet we only receive 5% of the UK's equity deals of value. And our spin-outs, they only receive 15 pence for every pound spent on spin-outs in the Golden Triangle, 6.3 times less. So we'd collectively researched and understood, and then had steadfast collective support for the need, business case to address that, and a case for a new Midlands investment patient capital funding vehicle to address that issue. That's great, but we were no longer operating under the auspices of MICRA. Our plans were now firmly in sight of the formal Midlands Innovation Collaboration. So that meant all of the PVCs needed to be kept abreast of developments, and from time to time, so did our Vice-Chancellors. The idea for a new funding vehicle, which eventually became Midlands Mindful, was well supported by senior leadership of our organisations, and that was fantastic. But it did now mean that we had to manage the regular communication with said PVCs, with CFOs, with Vice-Chancellors across 8 institutions. I think it's fair to say that was a bit of a challenge, especially for us, because we were quite autonomous, us TTOs, and all of a sudden we're operating in a bit of a goldfish bowl. I feel we could have done that without Helen and her team. even though at various times she had to put up with an awful lot of whinging and whining from all directions, particularly us, as we got the order and tone of these communications right. But she did a fab job. It's such a great learning. But there's been so many steps in the development of that concept. The establishment of a new company, an initial team, recruitment of senior executives, the negotiation of how universities will work with the company. Without universities, it's impossible for everybody to get involved in every aspect. But the support and backing that each of the TTO directors gave to each other as we engaged in those activities was absolutely tremendous. And there's been an absolutely fantastic feeling of a aligned direction and ambition, really second to no other collaboration that I've been involved in. Now, Mindful remains a work in progress, but it's already helping to promote our ecosystem, support our companies. And we've had such massive collective support from various stakeholders in both the East and the West Midlands. And given that strength of collaboration, we've been keen to continue to work together to develop the Midlands ecosystem even further. But we recognise that requires collective ambition and support from beyond just the 8 Midlands Innovation Universities. So that's why we have, as a collective of 15 Midlands University partners, with Loughborough University as lead partner, we work together to shape, apply for and win a connecting capability fund award of almost £10 million, in addition to £6 million of match support from partner universities and other regional stakeholders. This project will implement a portfolio of interventions, including the creation, management of a talent pool, scale up of our best practice accelerator programs across the region, the creation of inward investment champions, co-location and innovation expert networks, and tailored interventions in priority sectors for the region: health and medtech, advanced manufacturing, net zero, and creative and digital. So why 15 universities, you might well ask yourself? Has it not been challenging enough with just 8? We really wanted to boost the commercialisation ecosystem across the Midlands. And for that, we had to involve and engage all of the stakeholders of the ecosystem. And we didn't want to be selective about the university component of that ecosystem. I mentioned Aston Vision Sciences earlier as one of the micro success stories. And Helen recently had the privilege of bringing Lord Valence to visit Aston Vision Sciences in its new offices at Birmingham City University's Steamhouse facility, alongside other innovative businesses. And that sums up what sat behind the premise of forging ahead. You can't split our ecosystem apart. We all need to come together as a region to support the innovative businesses created by our universities, help them find the right space, funding, and support at the right time. And currently, the Midlands exports its IP. Some 40% of our spin-outs set up outside the region from the start, and we lose more as they grow. So what comes next? We've got to learn to work together as 15, and through Forging Ahead, we'll have the time and resource to do just that, and to draw on the full breadth of experience and relationships that sit within the partnership. Be a learning curve for us and for other regional stakeholders too, particularly our combined authorities, 2 of which have signed a compact to collaborate on innovation, but they're yet to really flesh out what does that actually mean. And when Mindful just completed its fundraise, we'll have a new and significant stakeholder in the region. We'll have to relearn how to collaborate with them as it evolves and grows its team and portfolio. So, knowledge exchange and technology transfer has changed enormously over the years. Now, my and our involvement in collaboration has always been a necessity. We don't just collaborate for the hell of it. But sometimes it's short-lived, because the funding runs out or partner objectives change. And sometimes that alignment and the strength of belief in a cause keeps those really deep and meaningful collaborations going and enables us the ability to capitalise on even bigger and better opportunities which you couldn't otherwise do or even envisage yourself. Our focus now is to ensure our collaboration makes it as easy as possible for our spin-outs and other regional startups and high-growth companies to find the talent they need, to get the development support they need, to access the expertise, the facilities, the space they need, whether that's university or provided otherwise, and to attract the right kind of investment they need at the right time. And in doing this, we'll be able to support companies to grow or maintain a link to our region as they grow globally, and to attract others who want to work in our region or with our regional companies. And a final remark from Helen. Our regional contexts are changing. We're seeing our combined authorities in areas that we have them becoming more involved in innovation and scale-up. We need to work out how we as individuals and groups and institutions collaborate with these emerging structures as they go through a journey of maturing capacity in terms of their understanding of research, innovation and technology transfer. So, thank you for listening. Now, over to you, I think. If you've got any questions.
So I want to say, before we move on to perhaps questions and discussions, a thank you for Dave for being so candid in his experience in the profession. And also for doing so well in giving Helen's experience in the profession or in the space too. And I think it's just remarkable to reflect on that journey of how the role has changed and how the canvas is much broader. And actually it's a really nice case study of delivering mission-driven impact and innovation and how long that takes. Now, I know Helen and David were well aware this is a case study, and many of you in the room have got similar stories in the places that you're at. And it's brilliant to hear about what's happening in this place. So perhaps you can have questions or very brief comments or thoughts, and maybe that could prompt an ongoing discussion about some of the issues that are involved in building these ecosystems in places. So if you have questions or comments, it's the usual rule. Put your hand up, and the microphone will come to you, and then introduce yourself and your organisation. We've got one at the front here. And as I say, if you do want to make a comment from your experience, please do, but please keep it brief because you're between us and the next thing.
David, thank you very much for your reflections, and I think a lot of people from the regions will take a lot from what you've said and certainly identify a lot of experience in there as well. So my question, you started by highlighting a really strong disparity between what you were experiencing in the Midlands versus the Golden Triangle. And I guess looking forward in 5 to 10 years with what you've got with the Mineforge, the CCF bid, do you think that's enough to close the gap? And if not, what do you think might be missing?
I think I'm not going to say it's a great start because we've already started. That's the temptation to say that. But I think this is the big catalyst that we needed right now. And I'm just so excited about the next few years because, this is about developing a region where, you can set up a company or a company can come in and they can just so easily find that support that they need. And if you couple that with, Mineforge, getting funding and attracting other funding to the region, I think that it really is going to be transformational over the next few years. Will it be enough? No, of course not, because what will happen is we'll generate a whole load of really exciting things, but it will attract other initiatives and other players in who will keep that and keep sustaining it. So I think this should be enough to sustain some really fantastic activity into the longer term, and that's what we need.
Any more questions, comments? I can't see brilliantly, so if you, with the lights on me, but if you put your hand up, one over there, which I think is Andrew.
Hello, Andrew Ray, University of Bristol. Towards the end, David, you said that partners' objectives might change over time. So I was thinking you've got 15 universities, they will start pulling in different directions. What mechanisms are you putting in place to try and keep you all moving together or disagreeing amicably if you need to?
No, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's probably multiple answers or multiple perspectives on this. Firstly, getting it right to begin with, making sure we're really clear on what this initiative is all about, right? And I don't think anybody can kind of really disagree with that. It's always got to be an objective. It's in everybody's interest that the region is much more commercially successful, because it makes all of our lives easier in terms of taking our research to market, right? So I think that's number one. And then I think the other answer to that is around the structures that are put in place. And again, there's so much experience there with Midlands Innovation, having councils, executive groups, and having those opportunities for kind of disagreement. And going back to the point that Helen would have made earlier, it doesn't matter if not everybody gets involved in every initiative. That's not always going to be necessary, right? But having some things where everybody gets involved, that makes a big difference.
Any other comments, questions? Well, if not, I'd love to carry on that conversation about place. I know there are many people from across the UK and different experiences, and it's a key issue in the government's agenda. So it'd be great to carry on that conversation either over dinner and networking or even on KEUK Connect, where we can compare notes. But let's say thank you again to David for his thoughts and his time. And then I'm just going to hand over to Amanda, who's going to give some brief reflections on the day so far, before I pop up again and give you some important information about what happens next today.
Thank you, Stuart. Well, what a fabulous day. I'm bowled over. Policy, practice, impact all in one day. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as I have. And I think we can definitely say it's time to declare a successful day one. We've certainly covered a broad range of topics, kicking off this morning with that powerful keynote from Dame Nancy Rothwell, who really set the stage, highlighting how crucial innovation, R&D and the strong university business collaboration is for the UK's growth and prosperity. It was a brilliant reminder of the big picture and the vital role we all play. And she fielded some challenging and interesting questions as well, which I think was really helpful. Throughout the day, we've seen some really truly forward-thinking sessions, the practical workshops on AI, showing us how AI tools can genuinely streamline our KE processes and can help us with everything from drafting patent applications to collaboration agreements. And it's clear that AI isn't a passing phase, it's not a buzzword, it's a powerful tool for our future. And as long as we use it with care, we won't get caught out. We looked at how we can build sustainable university business relationships, and thank you, David, what collaboration looks like on a local and regional ecosystem and how that can foster innovation. The spin out session was clearly well attended and really made us think about the why behind spin outs, challenging us to rethink approaches to creating and supporting them. We've had presentations on shared TTOs and virtual KTOs, and that has given us a really good understanding of the range of approaches that could be taken in the future to ensure that all universities and research institutions are able to exploit their expertise. And of course, the conference isn't just about the how, it's also about the what works, and we've seen and heard a lot about that in our policy engagement talks, the what next, where Tamsin talked about the future of the KE Concordat and KE culture, and of course what arguably is probably the most important element of KE practice, how we measure it, with sessions pushing us to think about keeping score and diversifying metrics beyond just financial indicators to truly capture the success of our commercial efforts. So a really packed day, but it doesn't stop there. Tomorrow, day 2 promises even more. We'll start with a crucial keynote from UKRI with Simon Hepworth, the new Director of Knowledge Exchange and Research England, giving us updates on policy and the outlook for the year. We'll continue exploring the future of partnerships with sessions covering strategically designed business partnerships, economic impact, and more about the future of shared TTOs, policy engagement, and measuring impact. There's also going to be sessions from the small and specialist institutions, which will highlight the unique strengths and innovative approaches of institutions like the Guildhall School of Music and Drama and the Royal College of Music. And it's a great reminder that impactful KE comes in all shapes and sizes. Alongside these sessions, there's also going to be a great opportunity for us to take part in some course taster sessions. Many of us in the audience have benefited from the fabulous courses delivered by KEUK, and I'd encourage you all to look at the portfolio of courses that we have and think about who in your organisation could benefit from the fabulous training. So these taster sessions will be a great opportunity to hear about what's coming on stream over the next year. And then, as Stuart mentioned earlier today, to cap it all off, we've got the Right Honourable Lord David Willits delivering a keynote on looking to the future of mission-driven knowledge exchange, which I'm sure will ensure all of us with a visionary outlook. But before all that, it's time to recharge our batteries before tomorrow's innings. The drinks reception starts shortly, followed by our networking dinner, and Stuart will come and tell us a little bit about the logistics of how that's going to work. So before you all run out, thank you for your incredible engagement today. It's been fantastic to hear and see and observe the conversations and discussions that have gone on. Enjoy your evening, and I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning to knock it out of the park for day 2. Thank you.